Hello, welcome to this introduction to the Batch Find and Replace tool in CollectionsIndex Web Edition. Find and Replace is one of a handful of batch editing tools available in your CollectionsIndex system that allow you to modify multiple records at once. Find and Replace is especially useful for reaching into fields to alter certain words or misspellings, prepend or append information, or to make specific changes to repeating field groups. To find batch and replace in your system, you're going to want to generate a search result. So if I just go to Objects over here, and let's do a quick word search, something like wood. Now if I scroll down to the bottom of my search results, where you might be familiar with other system functions and tools, we can see alongside other batch editing options like batch location update and batch edit, we find batch, find and replace. Now, by default, this will apply to my whole search result if I go ahead and run it, but I can be more specific if I want to. So if I just scroll up to our rows, if I select a few of these records and scroll back down, you can see the wording is now changed to just batch, find and replace across those selected records. Let's now have a quick look at the batch, find and replace pop-up window. When you click on the tool, you'll get a warning. It asks you to check that the number of records being edited looks correct, and obviously if it isn't, you should press no. The other key thing at this point is to make sure that you have considered and thought through your plans very carefully. Like the other batch editing tools, they do allow you to make sweeping changes across many records at once. So as ever, do approach these tools with caution and respect. So this is the layout for the batch, find and replace window. You'll note there are two tabs. If you want to find and replace in a normal singular field, for example, object brief description, you would use this fields tab. And if you wanted to find and replace across a repeating field group, for example, object or archive other number, then you would use the field groups tab. You can see we've got various options here to select the field, either as a singular field here or as field groups here. And do bear in mind that the groups you see here or the fields you see here are controlled by the current view. So if you ever can't see the fields you want, you need to make sure you do set this view to one that includes the field you are looking for. In this case with objects, if we set it to full, we know we'll be able to see all of the available fields. Of course, the best way to show you how this tool works is to go ahead now and run through a few examples. So for this first example, we're going to look at how we might do a simple update to replace a particular word across a group of records in a particular field. Now I have sabotaged these records on purpose, and it's worth noting at this point that we would like to say thank you to the Crafts Council and Canal and River Trust for the demo data we use in their system, and that any mistakes you see during these tutorials and examples are all mistakes that have been introduced purposely by myself. So looking at these records here, we can see that in common they've all got Canal spelt incorrectly, C-A-N-E-L. So obviously that's not the correct spelling of canal. And what we can do is use find and replace to find all the incorrect canals and replace them with our preferred spelling. So we have 7 records we've narrowed down here in a search summary. So let's go ahead and use batch, find and replace on these records. Down we go to batch, find and replace. This is going to edit data for 7 records. Is that okay to proceed? Well, yes, that's as many records as we're expecting to see. So we press yes, and here we are. Now, the mistake in this instance is in the title field, which is a single field, so we don't need to use the field groups tab. And what we need to do is find title in our field list here. And there it is. And now we need to enter our find and replace strings. So what do we want to find in the record? Well, we want to find the word canal spelt incorrectly like this, and we want to place it with canal like so. Now there's a few other options at the bottom of here which I'll quickly run through. You can choose to make your find and replace case sensitive. So let's take this as an example here. And so if we did have any lowercase iterations of this, they wouldn't be replaced. And that's probably for the best, because if they were lowercase, I'd want to replace them with a lowercase Canal down here. Another option is hold field match. I'm not going to use that now. What this does is specify that whatever you put into find should match the whole contents of the field. So if you want that, you can tick this option. Obviously, in this case, that's not what we want, so we'll leave that unticked. And then finally, we do have regular expression mode, which can be used to undertake some slightly more specialized operations using regular expression syntax. And we'll come on to some simple examples of that quite shortly. For now, let's run our find and replace as is and see what happens. Okay, so I've pressed OK, and now I've got this summary screen. We can see a bit of a log up here, which tells us how many of those 7 records were actually updated, how many had changes made, and if any errors occurred, we would see a number of errors listed here. Obviously, in this case, happily, there are no errors. Now, if this log was quite complicated or you want to reference it later, note you can download the log to keep and save and look at a later period. But in this case, I think we're okay. At this stage, the batch find and replace has been run. The changes have been made. If we go back and refine, we can run more find and replace operations. Or if we're finished, which we are for now, we can press close. It will refresh my search summary, and now we can see we have these 7 records, and we can see in title that Canal has been replaced in each case with the correct spelling. Moving on to example number 2. This is going to be a very similar find and replace operation, but we're going to show you a simple use of that regular expression mode. So let's take a look at these archive records here, and we've got another simple spelling mistake we'd like to correct. We can see that the word boat has been misspelled. So in 3 cases we have B-A-O-T, so we have the vowels the wrong way around, and in 1 case down here at the bottom we have boot instead of boat. And we can actually use regular expression to correct all of these at once. So down we go to batch find and replace again. We press yes, and we're back here in the find and replace window. So we are again working with the archive's title field. And now we want to use regular expression. Now note, something's happened as soon as I tick that. Regular expression is always case sensitive, so that's grayed out and ticked, and we can't use whole field match when we're using regular expression. We can't use that option. So just something to note there when you're using this feature. Now we can use special characters to achieve different results with our find. Now we know that boat misspelled with the vowels and boot, they actually have something in common, is that they start with a capital B, they have 2 other characters and end of a lowercase t. And now we've got regular expression mode on, those 2 full stops I've just popped in, they stand in for any characters. So what this is telling the search is to find any 4-letter word that starts with a capital B and ends with a lowercase t. So this should find both of our spelling errors. Now, of course, the one thing to be careful about using operations like this is there aren't any other words that might accidentally be replaced. So as ever, do think and plan quite carefully before you run these batch editing operations. In this case, I think we're okay. So I'm going to find any of these words that meet this criteria and replace them with boat. Hit OK. We can see 4 out of 4 records have been updated. Let's press close. And now we can see, yes, we have our 3 boats. The vowels are now no longer sort of mixed up, and boot has also become boat as well. So a successful use there of find and replace using a simple regular expression syntax. For our third example, I've jumped over to an object module to try find and replace on a different type of record. And this time I'm going to use regular expression to do something a bit different. What I want to do is insert something into the beginning of a certain field. So I don't want to swap any of the existing contents. I just want to prepend an additional piece of information. I'm going to retrieve this folder, some objects that I grouped together earlier. Now all of these objects have something in common. They all have something in the condition note field. So if I view this record, for example, if we scroll down to condition, we can see this has a condition note. And if we just go back to the search results and have a peep at another record, again, we can see a very short condition note in there too. And what we want to do is simply add the term curator's note and prepend that across all of these condition notes. So how do we do that? Using batch find and replace and using regular expression. Well, let's go back to our search results, the 19 objects in question. We scroll down to the bottom and we batch find and replace as usual. So we click on this, we click regular expression mode, and we're going to find our field, which we have already said is condition note. I'm going to put in another special character for regular expression, which is this upwards arrow, and this tells us to find the start of the string. So it's not going to replace any characters currently in the field, it's going to replace the kind of start. It's going to insert something at the beginning of the field. I'm now going to put it effectively write what I want inserting here, which is curator's note with a colon and a space. Press OK. And we can see 19 out of 19 records have been updated. And now if we go back to one of these objects, let's look at the stool we looked at earlier. Click on View. If we scroll down to Condition, we can see curator's note has now been prepended into this text. And again, just to show that this has occurred across the whole group, let's now look at another object. And again, scrolling down, curator's note. So a simple example there of using regular expression and find and replace to prepend information. And you can also append data into fields in a similar way. So for our final example in this video, we're going to look at how find and replace interacts with those repeating field groups and look at the second tab on that pop-up window. In this search results here, I have several objects, and one factor that ties them all together is a kind of fictional person that I've introduced as an example here called Emily Mason. And Emily was involved in the production of all of these objects. So she is listed as a production person. Now in some of the objects, she's listed as the maker, and in some of them, she's listed as the contributor. Now, wherever she's listed as a contributor, what I would like to do is actually change her to be designer, not contributor. I want to be more specific about her role, but I only want to do that where she's already recorded as a contributor. So I don't want to change her if she's listed as maker. And I also want to add a note into the groups that I've changed. So how do I do this using batch find and replace? Well, let's go down to the bottom here and let's click. And we're going to now select field groups. So first of all, we want to find the group. In this case, we're looking for object production person. Now, once we've selected a group, we'll see these options here at the top appear. This allows us to select what fields we want to search or try and find contents in. So this will identify any groups that match the criteria we put in here. In our case, we want to find any group that contains Emily Mason, in which her role is the contributor. So this should then ignore any of those groups where she is the maker, the artist. Once we've set that, and again we've got the same options we had before, but I'm not going to use any of those at the moment, we can select an action. What do we want to do when we find a group that has Emily Mason as contributor? Well, we can delete those groups if we want. we could choose to add new information, new repeating groups, or we can update the groups that we find, and that's what we want to do now. So if I click on update, I can now put in my replace strings, and I can choose what to do. So I can say, well, where it meets this criteria, let's replace role with designer. So let's swap contributor for designer, and let's add in that note as well. I can say updated via batch find and replace, just to test this out down here as well. So there is our operation ready to go. So just to summarize, we're looking for this field group where the data matches this here, and for any field group that matches this, these are the changes we want to make. Press OK. We got 4 out of 11 records updated. So what does that mean? Well, it means that only 4 records out of our 11 met those criteria. So in this case, I happen to know that Emily was only the contributor in 4 of these records. Let's now close. And we're back to our search result. So let's see if that's worked. If I view the first item, and we'll scroll down to production, you can see here that Emily Mason is listed as maker for this item. And we didn't want to change it if she was maker. So you can see no change has been made to this production person group, and there is no note inserted. So that seems to have worked correctly in the case of this item. If we move down to an alternative item, say this one, and scroll down to production, here we can see changes have been made. So previously this item, Emily Mason was the contributor. That's now been replaced by designer, and our note has been inserted as well. So an example there of the kind of technical surgical changes you can make to these field groups using batch find and replace. Well, that's about it for this introduction to batch find and replace. I'm sure we're going to do lots more future videos looking at more detailed and different uses of this tool. So if you have any special requests for those or videos on any other topic, do let us know and we'll get them into the queue for production for the channel. As ever, if you're not a Collections Index user, do bear in mind that we do offer no obligation free demos if you want to find out more about the software and the systems and what they can do for you. But otherwise, until next time, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.